This morning comes to us from the Gospel according to Mark, chapter 7, beginning verse 24. From there he set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there, yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter, and he said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home, found the child lying on the bed, and the demon gone. Then Jesus returned from the region of Tyre and Tyre and went by way of Sidon toward the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. They brought him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears and spat and touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus ordered him not to tell anyone, but the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Several years ago, my family returned home one day to find a visitor in our yard. Seems we had a possum living in our tree in our backyard. An unwelcome visitor, not the kind you want to find on your property. Yet a few days later, we saw the possum again, this time by the side of the road, and thought our possum problem was over, figuring it was the same possum. Well, it was, we think, the same possum, but our problems were far from over. We returned home shortly after that to find another visitor, this time a baby possum, wandering around our yard. No doubt had gotten hungry when Mom had not returned and was out looking for Mom or food. So we got a big bucket and eventually caught the baby possum and took it to the Virginia Wildlife Center, which was conveniently located near where we lived. Finally, we thought our problem with pests was over, but it was just beginning. The next day, there was another baby possum wandering around our yard, and we knew it was there because our dog saw it out the back door, out the sliding glass door, and absolutely went ballistic. I mean, just lost and went apoplectic. I don't know how to describe it. She was beside herself. So I went, got the bucket, restrained the dog, went and caught the second baby possum and took it to the Virginia Wildlife Center as part of our possum reunification and relocation program. But when I came home this time, I put the bucket by the door, and our dog took up permanent residence by that sliding glass door. She did not leave. She waited, and she didn't have to wait long. The next day, possum number 3. The next day after that, possum number 4. If there had been 5 baby possums in that litter, I swear it would have killed our dog. She would have just had a little doggy heart attack and gone on to her doggy reward. But as it was, there were no more baby possums. We thought, well, if they ain't, fine. Our problem with pests is over. Well, a few days after the last baby possum, we started noticing all these red welts on our legs and all those hungry fleas that were waiting for those baby possums, and that mama possum in return had come out looking for food and infested not only our yard, but somehow got in our basement. So I spent the next couple of weeks alternately spraying our yard and flea bombing our basement. So you can imagine my dismay when I read our text for this Sunday, and there was yet another pest to deal with. Friends, I don't have time for this. It wasn't a possum this time, it wasn't fleas. This time, it was a badger, right? The Syrophoenician woman. Badgering Jesus, even though she's an outsider, a Gentile, has nothing to do with the people of God, badgering Jesus to heal her daughter. Well, Jesus knows a badger when he sees one, right? And he appropriately dismissed her. But badgers don't give up, right? She kept coming back at him. Doesn't she know the pressure he is under to save the people of God from their sin? Doesn't she realize that he was hoping to get away for a moment, just to have some relief from the constant demands placed upon him? But she wouldn't let up, and she kept coming back at him. That's the problem with badgers, isn't it? They're everywhere. They're everywhere in our lives, even in our churches, right? I mean, let's be honest. You come here to worship, to a sanctuary, to get away from the pressure, the demands of life, the anxieties that are constantly pressed upon us. And what do you find? Well, guess what? The nominating committee is in full swing, and they're looking for leadership for our church. Letters have been sent out. Our CKC program is starting up again, our Christian Kids Club, and we need volunteers. We need you to help with that program to make it work and to be there for our kids. And one announcement, which I either didn't write or forgot, but I'll say it now. The Sharing Center is looking for volunteers. They need folks who can help pick up the food when it's delivered at the old Lowe's store once a week. They need folks with trucks or whoever can help take it from there to the Sharing Center. And guess what? In a couple weeks from now, it's stewardship season. Yeah, you come here, right, to get relief. Don't people realize the pressure you are under? Don't they understand the anxieties of life pressing upon you? You come hoping for just a word of relief, words of healing from our Savior Jesus Christ. And yet everywhere you look, you see nothing but badgers. Well, friends, take heart. In truth, I am no more a badger than that Syrophoenician woman. I'm not here to pester you to give your time and talents. Yes, we have lots of, as I like to call them, opportunities to serve. But my role today is like the role of that Syrophoenician woman, not to be a pest, not to be a badger, but to help you see the big picture, and to help you and us all cultivate healing. You see, the big picture is what the Syrophoenician saw and invited Jesus to reflect on, right? She does not question the primacy of Jesus' mission to God's chosen people. What she does, rather, is humbly remind Christ that even Gentiles are creatures of God who depend wholly on God for mercy, just like the Israelites. And Jesus, who is, after all, a man of resolve, but not stubbornness, sees the wisdom, right? The Lord is maker of us all, as the proverb says. Sees the wisdom of the woman's words, and he grants her request. Far from being a badger, she had reminded Jesus that she and indeed us all are both, she and her daughter were a child of God's making. Now, like this woman, we are also children of God, and like this woman, we too are often haunted by family problems. We too need healing. But here's the catch. I have no power, as Christ did, to pronounce your family clean. I can no sooner command healing than a farmer can command growth. So how do we hope to continue this healing ministry of Christ if none of us has that power as Christ did? Are we simply here to reflect on the good old days? Boy, if you'd only been here a few thousand years ago, Christ would have been here to offer healing. No, we can continue this ministry of Christ healing. We continue it in the same way a farmer produces corn from a patch of soil. We cultivate it. No, a farmer cannot command seeds to grow, but she can learn. She can learn how to clear a patch of soil, right? How to plow that soil, right? Following the contours of the land so to avoid erosion. How to when to plant, how to plant, how far to put the seeds, how to nurture the growth, how to water, to fertilize, and finally harvest a crop of corn. Growth is cultivated, not commanded. And no, I cannot command healing. But together, the church can learn how to clear the obstacles, right, that allow old wounds to fester. We can plow those hard hearts, ours and others, with the power of forgiveness. Plant that seed of hope through teaching and preaching. Nurture that growth through reflection and prayer. Weeding out the excesses of our lives that threaten to choke the gospel. And trusting all the while in the power of the gospel to transform that manure that the world throws on us as fertilizer and increases the harvest of forgiveness. And finally, in the church, we harvest the fruit of reconciliation, healing. Healing in a church is like growing crops. It is cultivated over time, not commanded in an instant. Now, I mentioned fertilizer. Now, we can all hopefully appreciate the analogy of the church work as cultivating crops. But I always like to remind people, you don't have to worry about fertilizer. The world provides the fertilizer. You know what it is, right? Manure. It'll dump it on us by the truckload, right? But you see, that is the power of the gospel. What does the gospel seed do with manure? Turns it into the fruit of the Spirit. Into peace, joy, love, gentleness, kindness, and so on. Self-control, forgiveness. That is the power of the gospel. Rather than hitting back when we're hit, rather than returning hate for hate, the power of that gospel, despite all that manure, is it transforms it right into that forgiveness. We return love for hate. And that's why it is so important, that gospel, even today in our world. But first, we got to clear that ground, plow that heart, plant that seed, nurture it. That takes time. And that's what we are about here in the church. Taking that time to cultivate that healing ministry. So as I stand before you this morning and invite you to give due consideration to all the opportunities to serve that are before us, I am not a badger pestering you for some favor. Instead, I am, like that Syrophoenician woman, a child of God, inviting you to see the big picture, to find your place in our church, in order that you can help us engender healing in our families and in our world. In other words, I cannot pronounce your family healed as Christ can, but I can invite you to foster the healing of Christ by your participation in the body of Christ, his church. Together, the church can cultivate this healing ministry of Jesus Christ for all. Let all